that's the fundamentals that I would go to. Like if you're physical and you have the ability, if you have that competitive advantage to be local in a market, just observe, see what's going on.
Neighborhoods and areas, and one end of a very long street might be good and the other one might not. And so how was your education curve?
Nobody in my life that did real estate, by the way. No entrepreneurs, anybody like that I could talk to. No mentors, no nothing. So all this stuff was like through reading books, kind of like watching people, observing people. And I was always like, I told you, like kind of at a young age, I was introduced to the sales, that type stuff. And I was flipping baseball cards. And I think I always wanted to earn. I always wanted to compete in some way.
I've helped a lot of cowboys come into Detroit and they all die. And the reason why they die is because all right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Leads to Deals podcast, where we talk about everything from leads to deals, and everything we talk about leads to deals. I feel honored today to have somebody I've had my eye on in the REI space, particularly over the past few years. He's in the Detroit market, which is, I think, one of the most dynamic Midwest markets out there. He's got a story, I think, that a lot of you guys will kind of see a lot of familiarity with, and his coming into the industry, albeit unexpected, but coming from that blue collar and then taking that work ethic and grind into the REI space to make an impact there in Detroit, Michigan. Steve, thank you for coming on, brother.
Scott Morris, man, great to be on with you again, and can't wait to get into this. So,
yeah, dude, I love your market, man. I kind of like to go into people's backgrounds, but I want to talk about the market and then your background. You're born and raised Detroit, right?
Yeah, the suburbs. So on the other side of 8 Mile. So okay. I can't claim Detroit. Then they'll know I'm lying. So, but yeah.
but you're from that area. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I literally graduated high school on 8 Mile, which is like a stone's throw away. You know, nice. I'm a product of alternative education, adult education. So, but I did get my diploma and made my way on to bigger and better things. So
yeah, I wonder, man, dude, because when I grew up, I'm in my 40s, Steve. I don't know. How old are you?
Same
You're in your 40s. You
Yeah.
know, man, like, they talked about the bygone eras and they talked about the Motor City, and some of the old videos and photos that I've seen, it was like Mecca. It was the shining star of the United States, what New York was when I was a kid to what Detroit used to be back in the day. I don't know exactly when that era was, but do you remember the time when Detroit was held in the country's highest regard, or did you kind of come after that? Yeah.
No, it was, well, I was a kid, so I'll just give you a little story. So we had, my mom, it was a mom and two boys, single mom. We lived in an apartment, and this is like a couple blocks north of 8 Mile. So on the decent side. But that was like the era of crack. It was the 80s. So I woke up one morning and the TV I just didn't have a TV. Somebody literally went in there with a kid sleeping in his pajamas after he was watching, He-Man or whatever. And I fell asleep on the couch like I normally did. And I just woke up to no TV. This is 4 years old. And that was that era. So it's, just blue collar automotive, but
yeah.
It's like any other major city, you got the really nice parts and the really not so great parts. But there's a lot of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Nostalgia is actually a dangerous thing, because what it is it's reliving the past, reliving a past memory of something that was there that's no longer. So there's a lot of people that are literally stuck in that era, that are stuck in the, hey, I remember when this was like this. And, it was dubbed the Paris of Midwest because it was the richest city in the country. Period, hands down, because of Henry Ford. You can thank Henry Ford. And really, if you study the greats, you're going to dig into Henry Ford and you see how powerful and wealthy that guy was. And he was hanging out with, Carnegie and Rockefeller and, doing all this wild shit, but he had ungodly gobs of money, and he put the world on wheels, and he owned everything. And, some people ask about the music scene too, because we do have a good music scene. There's no question to that. Some people say, why? Okay, why does Detroit have such a good music scene? Is it, is it just because the culture? Is it in the air? Was it because of the Southern influence of, people coming up to get, automotive jobs? Yes, and yes. But the real reason, one of the biggest reasons, is is the Detroit public schools back in the day, 30s, 40s, 50s, was so well funded. It was so well funded. They had musical instruments in every class. They had everything. Like, look up any Motown documentaries. They'll tell you about them. So it was about the money. It was about having access to, instruments and being around that scene. And that's kind of like what breeds everything. And that leads me to my next thing is environment and culture. So environment and culture is so important. If you're not in the right environment, and I see your office, Scott, I watch your videos.
Yeah.
If you're not in the right environment, if you don't have the right people around you, if you don't have the right, the right energy and, the people that are doing the things that you want to do, good luck achieving it. You're not going to be able to achieve it on your own. So it's probably why you're watching this podcast right now. It's probably why you're building a culture in your team. You have mottos on your wall. You have a certain way that you want to present. You have a standard. And I think that's so important. I know I went on a little rant here, but it doesn't matter where you're from. The bottom line is you got to get around people who are winning or people that are aspiring to do better. And that's why I'm so.
Dude, you said like so many things that resonate with me. Literally, as you were talking, I was like, dude, he could come here and stand in front of this whole sales floor. And if like you could AI my voice, they wouldn't know any difference between us two. Everything that you're saying is what I relate to them. Every new class that comes in here, Steve, after they've done day one, like towards the end of day one, I'll go in there and introduce myself as the CEO. And I pretty much say the same story, how I got here, et cetera, et cetera. But at the very end, I say, if I could just give you one piece of advice, and the only one piece of advice, it would be this following quote by Henry Ford. And then I have to also check the room. Like, does everybody know who Henry Ford is? Of course they do. They've heard of the car, but they don't really know much of the story and truly the impact that he had, like a Carnegie, right? And so his quote was, it's a longer quote. I use the first half, which is hustle while you wait. Hustle while you wait. Some of you guys are going to leave here with tonight's training manual, leaving this classroom, this big binder, day one, and you're going to go home and you're going to high five your friends, dude, cool first day at that new office, and you're going to eat dinner, and then you're going to come back to work tomorrow and sit in this classroom. But other you guys will hustle while you wait for that next day to start. And you'll go home and you'll study and you'll write out these pages and pages of rebuttals and et cetera, et cetera. And to me, that's always been such a powerful quote because I know there's a difference between the guys who hustle while they wait for that next opportunity versus the guys who just merely wait for that next event to then put their ass in action.
100%. Yeah, man. Because here's the thing: is we're always going to be, it's like it's a lull. It's ups and downs. You're not going to be landing deals every day. You might go a week, 2 weeks, a month. Sometimes, like you're going to have dry spells, and you're going to be in, like losing momentum and things are not clicking. And that's really the key is, from what I noticed from high performance salespeople or anybody really, it's about just continuing to do what you're supposed to do regardless of the results. So the results are kind of what we measure. That's the lagging measure. We just need to focus on doing the inputs, right? So making the calls, making the offers, whatever the metrics are, that's what we need to focus on. Not so much, hey, what's our conversion on that? Yeah. Continue to do the fundamentals and everything else will work itself out. So,
these are all things that we say that we also heard from somebody else because they're like evergreen. You know what I mean? Like these are the same things we teach our kids. These are the same things that, somebody, and it stuck with us though. And what you said about having a good environment, Detroit's got a really tough reputation. Candidly, I've never been to Detroit. Never had a desire, candidly, to go. Nothing's brought me there. I shouldn't say that. I would love to go just to see it. Nothing's really ever brought me there. No opportunity has brought me there. And
it's
I
like
think
going
also,
to Akron, Ohio. Why would you go there?
Pretty much, right?
Yeah, it's the Midwest. It's not like going to Miami or Atlanta. Yeah. It's kind of out of the way. There's nothing really, unless you know somebody there, you're not going to come, which is cool.
But it's got a tough reputation, man. Yeah. And it's got a reputation where I think that, there's probably a lot of kids who innately have a lot of things going for them, but that repetition of a poor environment doesn't allow them to escape it. And I think a lot about Detroit as I think about Chicago. And we'll get into the REI world here in a second, but I'll plant the seed with you. I know that there's kids that are creating felonies, doing felonies every single day, whether it's drug dealing or whatever it may be. And some of these guys are in the exact same crack houses that guys like me and you want to wholesale. They just don't even know the concept wholesale exists. And so like as a mission, as almost a pastor, an REI pastor, I'd love to be able to touch an imprint on those kids. Like, hey, these two guys right here, this podcast right here could spark you on something to take you out of that. You're in this bad environment, but there's gold in that bad environment. And that's some of those houses there. And if you just knew these couple of little tweaks, you could do something that's not illegal and actually really profitable and way more consistent, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought because, what we're suggesting is basically a new idea. And it's tough. So if you were ever in a situation to where you felt that you had to do something in order to get money, or you had to do something in order to survive, I call that survival mode. So if you're basically, quote unquote, hustling right now and in survival mode, maybe you're just, maybe you're working a 9-to-5 job and you're making $17. That's survival mode. Like if you got to pay for rent, a car, and you got a cell phone, like there ain't much left over at the end of that, even with, some help. Okay. So if you're in survival mode, whether, you're working a job or you're doing some things that you'd rather not do to make money, there are other options. And I think here's the thing. So if you're in a position to listen to a podcast and you can put work, you can speak on the phone, you can send a text message, you can do all these things. You have the ability to make money. If you have a cell phone, you can do this. You can wholesale. And I think it's about that desire. It's like that's one of the main things Napoleon Hill talks about is that desire. What's the difference, between somebody who doesn't make it and becomes successful? But yeah, it's an option. Real estate's an option because, hey, it's real. You can go drive by, you can go touch it, you can see it, you can understand it. And I think with a little bit of education, I think a high school student can do it. So to your point, Scott, like I feel the same way, and I, want to extend that. Like if you're in high school right now, or you're a young guy or young gal or whatever, you're in a situation to where you want to do something, like you can do it. You can absolutely do it. And there's so much free content out there, and just listen to the podcast. But bottom line is about finding deals. If you can find a deal and talk to people, you can make money.
Yeah, my buddy, before I ever got into this industry, Steve, he was doing wholesaling. I mean, like raw dog bandit side wholesaling. And this was like, I don't know, 5 years before I ever got into it. And the concept blew my mind because we'd go drink in downtown Orlando, go have some fun, whatever. And then he would leave at like 1 o'clock in the morning, or, really, really late when he's like, I got to go put a bunch of signs out. And the whole back of his Jeep would be filled with these signs. Yeah. And then one time, I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. So I went back home to Richmond, and I went to near the Raceway, which is like a really tough area. And I just put out like 5-6 signs because I was just curious. The amount of phone calls that I got, also from the code inspector people, but the amount of phone calls that I got from local people in that area, and I didn't know what to do with the lead at all. Like I literally didn't know. I didn't know what questions to ask. I just wanted to test the concept. But having those conversations with those people, I was like, oh, this barrier to entry is really just activity. It's action. And if I would have known about this when I installed security systems, or, when I was helping my dad on the roof, I would have shortened that cycle to be able to get probably into this if I would have just known about it. And so I see a guy like you didn't start real estate either, right? Like you came out of high school and you were doing blue collar work.
Yeah. And so funny story. So I think the best thing that helped me, and I didn't realize it. So this is hindsight, and I'll tell a little story, and I'm sure we could talk for hours. But basically, when I was 12 years old, we were all riding our bikes. It was back in the days where kids, that's all we did was ride bikes. Like literally, we would go anywhere. If we needed to go somewhere, we didn't ask our mom. We'd just jump on the bike and go. And we'd ride for miles. And so we were riding through our neighborhood, and a white van pulls up. And it's seriously a white van, and it's an extended version. And we were kind of at the age, we were like, I think like 6th, 7th grade. So we started to, we were getting to the point to where you couldn't really screw with us too much. Yeah. So we weren't like of kidnapping age. So we like pulled our bikes around and stopped and poked our head in the window. We saw other kids in the van. We say, okay, what's going on here? Guy rolled down his window, and he goes, hey, you guys want a job? Just like that. And, we saw like, young guys and girls in the back, and they seemed happy. And obviously there was no foul play going on. And we're like, well, what are you talking about? And he was like, well, we can tell you more. We got to get your parents, permission and all this and yada, yada, yada. But basically he pulled up to us, saw us, asked us if we wanted a job. And this guy is like, 50 years old, driving a white van, bunch of kids in the back, has the ponytail, like literally like that guy. You go, okay, well, this is selling subscriptions to the Detroit News. He goes, this is what the story is. So basically it's door-to-door sales. And if anybody would have known this, anybody that's watching this that's still around that knew me at 12 years old, know that I didn't talk much. I wasn't a talker. I was very shy. I was very, I had my head down. I listened way more, very introverted, much different than I am now. So that was like, I don't know. It wasn't something I wanted to do. I would have never done it. Never in my wildest dreams. So basically, fast forward, we started going to door and selling subscriptions to the Detroit News, and we had a script. Okay. We knock on these people's doors and we recite our script that we had to memorize.
Yes.
And then whoever got the most subscriptions, whether it was a paid in full or a cash, or we took credit cards, they actually wrote down their credit card numbers on the slip, we would get paid on that. So it was commission-based sales, door-to-door commission-based sales. And it was rewarded based on, how many people got the most sales. And on a couple occasions, I was somebody who got the most sales. And I attribute that formative experience to probably, most of my success, that and my grandfather, because he had the ability to talk and communicate.
And how did you observe that about your grandfather? What about him?
He just talked to everybody.
Yeah.
He just talked to everybody. He was,
really friendly guy, never met a stranger type guy.
No, like he was that guy. He was Don Wrinkles. He was like, he was the guy that would just crack on everybody. And he was kind of a larger than life character. And, he kind of had a big presence. So he'd walk in and he was so nice to everybody. Like whether it was at fast food, somebody, somebody at the gas station. And he was in sales too. And I didn't know it. I didn't know exactly what it was. So he had a ton of stories. He was, he was in World War II, actually, kind of like right at the tail end.
Yeah.
We had like a lot of just life experience in general of like, he was well-traveled, well-spoken, he had some college, which is kind of rare. So he actually raised me. I know I'm going on a rant here, but the bottom line is the two most important things is that I'd say the introduction to door-to-door sales and then the influence from my grandfather. And, so I want to say if you're ever in a position to where you're uncomfortable talking to people, it's hard to do. It is hard to do. It's not easy. It's not easy asking somebody to give you their house for 50 cents on the dollar. Like it's not an easy conversation. It's not easy getting rejected. It's not easy getting hung up on. But the bottom line is your ability to communicate effectively with people is directly proportionate to your success.
Yeah.
It's all about communication.
I teach these kids here. It's like what they're going to get. They're going to make money with me. The same thing. It's commission plus, obviously, here I have to do salary. But as a side note, having a commission-only job, my first real sales job, was the best thing that ever happened to me. Like,
what was that?
So it's timeshare sales.
Okay.
So from 21 to like 32, I was in and around the timeshare travel club vacation sales. Matter of fact, since I turned 21, I haven't had a paycheck other than we're required by law. Like, hey, listen, you can't take distributions like this. You're going to have to take distributions and some level of payroll. And man, there's so many times where I didn't have money and literally had nothing and nothing to rely on. And, going to AmScot, which was a thing in Florida where I had to go, essentially the Indian loans types things and all that pain that made. I didn't have the opportunity to screw up that next pitch. And there was a lot of pitches in my life when I was doing sales that aggressively back then where it was like, this is how we continue to thrive. And you walk that fine line between being aggressive and making sure you're doing the right thing. And because you don't want to, because if you're trying to scam somebody, I literally thought about it. Yesterday, I was watching this video about some Indian scammers online and how like they have this call center. And I was just like, man, there's so many scumbag companies out there that are in call centers. They don't last. their lives are terrible. They're making some money now, but it's all like short-term stuff that evaporates. And so, anyways, I'm just proud of what we had. I'm proud of that experience, kind of similar to you, that formidable stuff. I was going to ask though, you started originally though a painting company. That's what I wanted to get into. You out of high school, out of high school you did something else, and then you went into your painting company. You became a CEO.
Yeah, so I feel like an old dude because literally when I was 17 years old, I would jump on the bus for $2.25 and fucking take a transfer with I would carry like my paint bucket and like go paint apartments for $10 an hour. Like that's what I was doing like after I graduated high school in the summer. And then I got a job at a counseling center at a drug rehab. I worked there for 5 years.
Nice.
And then painted in between. So I got like some professional experience because we had to like dress up and do meetings and like, wear a professional feel, talk to people again. Like it was just all talk therapy, right? You got to talk, listen. Like it's all like really it's more listening than talking if you know anything about that space. But you get, you got to be a good listener.
Same as sales. So honestly, it's like you're asking a targeted question to get an elongated answer.
Yeah, and as these people are talking, they're going to solve their own problems and kind of come up with their own solutions and hear themselves say it because that's the thing. And I've been accused of this, Scott. I've been accused of sounding a little bit over the top or being a little bit too forward and polished, right? You don't want to sound like a salesman, or you don't want to sound like somebody who's coming off as like, hey, basically forceful. I think you said you don't want to force the sale, but it's a lot. It's a lot of practice. It's a lot of talking. It's the art of negotiation. So if you have somebody and you're able to listen to them and kind of like hear them out, and you're not trying to force it and just can we swearing on
of course,
fuck on the first date type thing. Like it's just stop. Like stop with all that. It's like these realtors will call me and be like, hey, I got a deal. I'll present them with a deal, and they go, well, you want to list it? You want to list it? And I go, you want to fuck? You want to fuck? Like, no. Like, wait a minute. Hold on a second. How do you know it's a viable candidate for a listing? Like, don't jump into that. Massage the relationship a little bit. Go on a first date. It's okay to follow up. Like going in for the kill is just like you blew it, and it kind of what it does is it shows. I think it shows where you're at in your number one, your sales journey, your career, and how desperate you are. So you need to be careful about coming off as somebody who needs something more than the other party. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's also kind of industry specific-ish. Sometimes it's having somebody walk into your store. That is the only time, right? Like they're a tourist and you're in your store. In timeshare, we were trained on today only. And that was one of the biggest assets that I ever had in my life was that today only sales cycle.
Okay.
This is different. This type of communication is different. What I say is the fine line is always ask for the business, but don't blow out the deal by asking for the business. Like you should, if you've done a well-executed presentation, you should ask for the business. You've earned the right to ask for the business. However, if it's now not the right time, don't blow it out by having commission breath, because that's one of the worst things that happen on any sales floor is the customer can sense it. I swear, I promise you the customer can sense a smile through the phone. They can sense if you're standing up through the phone, the neurological way that you're communicating transmutes through all these wires all the way back there to the United States. And I also believe that you can overcook it, and you just got to be able to read the scene. So I'm with you. Selling somebody a trinket in a store is wildly different than asking them to sell their largest asset ever. But you always got to ask for the business. You always got to ask for the business because you'll lose more deals by not asking for the business than you'll ever lose by asking too much for the business.
100%. And you don't ask, you don't get. Period.
Amen.
End of story.
Yeah.
And that's Dan Pena. I mean, you gotta ask. You gotta ask. And most people aren't asking. They're not making the offer. They don't even get to the stage to where they're making an offer. Right.
Yeah.
So there's two ends to it. It's like, Giving
it's
you some
regional.
ridiculous offer and then like just never making the offer.
Yeah, I think about your market too. Like we have to approach our sellers, and for everyone that's listening, I'm talking about from like a real estate nationwide example. But we have to talk to people in New York who are wildly different than people in Alabama. It's a different cadence. It's a different tonality. It's a different harshness than when you talk to them. And so, like I think of Detroit, and I think of the Midwest, and I think about your market. For you, you're in the REI space. So let's bridge that gap real quick. So anyways, so you did the recovery, you assisted kids in recovery, and then where'd you go from there?
Yeah, so see, we're both ADE. This is perfect. We can get a lot of shit done. So, all right, so let's go back to your question because I actually remember your question. You asked me, what'd you do right after high school? And yes, I did painting. So a lot of blue collar stuff, started painting houses, painting apartments, like, got to do that kind of grimy work. And like painters are like, kind of a step above house cleaners in the caste system. And I know we're not in India. You mentioned Indians. We're not in India. We don't have a caste system here in America, but there is a class system. So there's such thing as like blue collar, white collar, and people are educated,
100%.
people aren't educated. So you kind of have that, that sense about you that, maybe this person is,
it's a stigma.
It is a stigma.
Yeah.
But now the blue collars are just crushing because they're charging $1,000 an hour.
Dude, my buddy who started a plumbing company out of high school just bought a brand new beachfront house in OBX. Shout out to you, Brian Green. And dude, I remember helping him. He literally gifted him his first website, and dude, he's murdering it. Him and his whole crew are murdering it right now.
Plumbing.
Yeah,
I wish
plumbing.
I would have gotten a plumbing instead of painting.
Yeah.
I think it's great. But so that morphed into a full-on company, and we were the biggest shop in my town, and
Nice.
we were slinging gallons of paint, painting everything that we could see, and it was all sales and marketing. So I liked that. It was sales and marketing. How many crews can I get going? How many vans can I get going? So we ramped that up, and the bottom line is it was just the margins weren't there, and it was just not something that I was interested in, spending the next 10 years of my life on. So I burned out my 20s kind of doing that thing after I worked at the counseling center.
Yeah.
Which was cool. It just was what it was. And
it was rewarding though. I bet it was super rewarding to work with those kids.
Yeah.
At the counseling
Yeah. It
center.
didn't feel like work.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, man. It didn't feel like work at all. So, and that it was a nonprofit. That's one thing I want to bring up. So it was a nonprofit. It was a totally different than of course what we're doing. So, my heart's there. Like as far as like giving back and like helping people and, giving people opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for these, either a nonprofit or maybe it's a person in your life or,
amen.
Could be a church or whatever. Like all that stuff's very, very important. And, but, just to get through like what you're asking me is total blue collar. And, I saw a niche in the market and I wanted to exploit it, learned a ton, didn't make a ton of money, didn't get rich doing it. Didn't end up, like your buddy, in OBX.
If you don't mind me asking though, because I do value that journey, you've learned a lot now in the REI vertical and just being an entrepreneur in general. If you knew what you knew now, and you had to stay in the painting format industry, could you have taken it more levels or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What would have been some of the things you would do differently knowing what you know now in that business, that old business?
Get the fuck out of the way and just put people in place and put systems and processes and just sit at the top and just run it like a business. And get out of the way.
Yep.
I mean, that's
the hardest thing for people to do, including myself, on so many things.
Yeah. And I think about this. I think about this a lot. And I come across this harsh when I talk to, younger people in the business because, they want to do everything themselves. They want to take ownership of it. They massage every idea. Everything's so important. Their interaction with like going and doing that thing is like the most important thing in their day. And I'm like, that thing that you're doing has no value to your business at all. You don't need to be doing it. You need to hire somebody else to do that. So it's about elevating yourself and becoming that CEO, having a CEO mindset instead of a self-employed mindset. That's how I look at it. Because listen, if you want to be self-employed, you want to make $200,000 a year, as a contractor or running a painting company or doing this,
Wildly
that's
possible.
great. You go ahead and do that. That's fine. But just do the math. Just make sure that you do the math on it, because I think I failed in a lot of ways. I just didn't do the math on a lot of these endeavors. It just I wasn't honest with it. So
one of the things I was expecting to hear, not necessarily an answer to that question, and maybe this is where it pivots for you, but I was thinking, all right, okay, cool. So he got out, he did the recovery with the kids, that had its tail, that had its life cycle. And then you did the professional painting. And I was thinking like, man, I bet you he got hired by some fix and flippers often enough that he was just like, oh, I see what these guys are doing. Yo, let me come on this side of the equation. Is that how you got introduced, or is it like something completely outside?
Yes. So you're very perceptive, and I don't think I told you that. So 100%. So I was like, a lot of those gallons of paint we were throwing on flip houses and new construction and people doing pop tops and all this. And I was looking at their numbers and I was going, whoa, I'm charging them, let's say $5,000 to paint the inside of their house.
Yeah.
And I'm netting $1,000 maybe. Yeah. And I'm there for like a week plus touch-ups plus 20 calls plus 20, all these touch points. And I'm thinking, they're making so much money. This is all I was thinking. And if I could just do one house, if I could just do one freaking house, like, I'm good, and that's what I did. So I always knew that real estate was powerful. I just knew it. I sensed it. I was, there's nobody in my life that did real estate, by the way. No entrepreneurs, no rich uncle. I had no rich uncles, Scott.
Yeah.
None. Like, I didn't even have anybody like that I could talk to. No mentors, no nothing. So all this stuff was like through reading books, kind of like watching people, observing people. And I was always like, I told you, like, kind of at a young age, I was introduced to the sales, that type stuff. Yeah. And I was flipping baseball cards. And I think I always wanted to earn. I always wanted to compete in some way. I was smart enough to be able to determine value on something pretty quickly, whether it was a baseball card or maybe it was a house or whatever else. So I'd started studying these things before, and I bought my first house when I was a young guy on, working at that counseling center. I got approved for a loan back in the early 2000s, where apparently they were approving everybody for loans, but I didn't know that. I felt pretty good about it, and I house hacked it. Didn't know what house hacking was, threw some roommates in there. But yeah, fast forward to my painting company. I was working for these builders. They were doing pop tops. They were flipping these houses. And like I said, we were just literally painting the walls. They were just treating us like just get through my houses. Like, I was just a cog. I was just a part of their machine. And man, I did some jobs, and I got some checks, and I got out of that painting company, and I just, and it turned into a construction company. We're doing a lot of stuff too, but like, basically, I turned that into a couple big paychecks. I took that money, shut that company down, and I just bought a house.
It's so funny because you said you took that in some big paychecks. That was big paychecks by those standards at that stage of your life, but not necessarily by now. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people understand. It's really not a lot of money that it takes to get into the REI space. It's really not. But when you're about to make that pivot, it sure does fucking feel like a lot. Like, it feels like the end of the world. All the chips are on the table, and maybe at that stage they all are. But the exposure side, I think it's like, if you have work ethic and some good people guiding you, and you're going to consume and then execute, you'll be really successful in this space. And I think the level of mediocrity also is such an advantage in this space too, that just by merely calling back your customers, you're like 50% ahead, or you're ahead of like 50% of the rest of the people in any given market by just like working whatever opportunity falls into your lap. And so I wonder, in Detroit, like, do you consider Detroit to be a really competitive market for REI deals nowadays? Is it softer?
It's hard to compare because I don't really do many other markets, but I think it's becoming more competitive because just so many people know about it, and there's just so many rooftops.
Yeah. I know that I've helped a lot of cowboys come into Detroit, and they all die. And the reason why they die is because they don't know what are the good parts and the bad parts. And everybody that I've helped inside of Detroit like knows it. They get it. They know exactly what, and it's not even just zip codes from what I understand. It's like neighborhoods and areas, and one end of a very long street might be good and the other one might not. And so how was your education curve? Did you take on any properties? Did you end up getting your teeth kicked in on, or what are you kind of looking for now in Detroit?
Oh yeah. So like I'm 41 now, but when I was like, mid 30s, 36, like when I first started, like 2018, 2017, 2018, I went head first, and I'm like, I can buy houses for $20 a square foot and sell them for $100 a square foot. Like, okay, let's go. And it was on. And I lost my ass. I lost a lot of furnaces, and I lost a lot of appliances, and I lost my ass. Let me tell you something.
Those furnitures are with that TV you were messing as a kid.
Yeah. So if you're flipping houses in the winter, and there's smoke coming out of that chimney, that's an invitation for people to come steal your furnace. Just make sure you got a house sitter. And this is like, I was in like some of the nicer neighborhoods, and it's just one of those things to where, again,
Understood.
like it's any metro area, you're going to have this. So if you're kind of like in an up and coming neighborhood and you're trying to ride that trend, which I was, like, admittedly, right? Maybe there was only one dumpster on the street when I was working, not 3 or 4. Like, just drive the streets, just pay attention, like if you're anywhere, any part of town, like, and that's the fundamentals that I would go to. Like, if you're physical and you have the ability, if you have that competitive advantage to be local in a market, just observe, see what's going on, get out and talk to people. That's how you learn. Like, how many houses have dumpsters in front of them? How many roofers are on the roof? Like, are people doing work to these things? Or do you drive down the street and you'll feel like you should be there, find out a house, place you want to flip. So you have a lot of up and coming spots, and you can make some really big swings before, like, the market catches up, before people find out. And then before because you can buy them really good and then sell them high, and you can pull comps from like a couple streets over. Like, that's really how you can make some really nice swings, especially if you're flipping, right?
Since 2018, since you went head first into this, like, what has been your main strategy? Are you wholesaling? Are you buying and holding, flipping? What's your last 6-7 years look like?
So we've done everything. We've done literally, we've done the flips. We've done a lot of wholesaling. We started buying properties subject to the existing mortgage, buying properties on land contract. And then we've done owner financing, where we buy the properties and then resell them on a land contract or on terms. Really love those. So a lot of different strategies that we've done. We've done the rentals. We've done student rentals, done Airbnb. So, like, literally anything we've done it. Small apartments, forgot to mention that. We've done some apartment deals. Land, I bought land. I bought an industrial piece of property on accident. Made a shit ton of money. Made $150,000. Didn't even realize what I had.
I love that.
Like, on accident. And the guy calls me and he goes, "Hey, I need you to buy this property." And I'm like, "Well, what do you want for it?" He's like, "I don't know, like $40,000 or something." And I look it up on the map, and it's like, don't go there. Like, I'm not going to see this thing. Why you want to sell it? He goes, "I just don't want to lose my life, man. I don't want to go down there no more." I'm like, "Okay, perfect. I'll fucking buy." That sounds like it sounds like something I want,
Yeah.
But if you guys can't tell, my risk tolerance is, really, yes, it's kind of high. So, looking back, I make myself nauseous at some of the shit that I did back then. So,
I'm sure.
But talking about it now, it's like, okay, so I accidentally made money. Congratulations. I wasn't supposed to do that. But basically what it was zoned M1. It was an industrial piece of property. And a trucking company ended up approaching me like, a month and a half, 2 months later, and made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So every now and then you do get lucky, but
of course.
You can't expect to do that. So,
but let's talk about that for a second. So I look at Detroit and Chicago as kind of like similar.
Oh, yeah.
And I like Chicago. I'm doing enough dials in there to really know it, and I see how their spreads are. And then you have places like Gary, Indiana, which
Okay.
is below a Detroit in regards to activity on the buyer side. But when I look at all these markets, here's what I tell people, and you correct me or tell me how you feel about this. I say, hey, listen, you're bound to get more deals at a lower spread, but your cost per deal will be less. And so when you don't have but so many dollars for marketing dollars, you can't go into LA and go, if their average cost per deal for whatever marketing channel is $22,500, that means that you're realistically, statistically going to need $22,000 in PPC before you get your first deal. Versus it normally trends smaller spreads and smaller cost per deal, which just means smaller marketing budget. I know you'll hit the occasional home runs, like you just said, 150s and the 50s and the 40s. But do you agree that it's kind of like that it's a little bit thinner spread there where you're at?
Yeah. So I guess compared to an LA and,
Compared to anybody, I don't know if you've go to any of these masterminds, but everybody says in general, they're like, oh, my average spread's about 17.5, 20.
Yeah, we do a lot of sub 10s. I mean, we're hitting a lot at like, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. We hit some 12s.
Yeah.
We pop some 30s. We do pop some 30s, but it's not like that's not, the average. So, it's cool to make $7,000 to $10,000 on a deal.
Do you have more supply than buyers there?
Certain neighborhoods, yeah.
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 And are they worthy of being bought and there's just not enough activity? Or is it like these are just scumbag, not safe places?
Well, it's the rehab. So it's a lot of times new wholesalers will bring deals or present deals, and the rehab exceeds the value of the property.
Exactly. Great point.
So,
excellent point.
That's really what you need to watch out for. And if I could give you any, piece of advice, whether you're underwriting a deal or trying to figure out, okay, how much is this thing worth? What should I get in our contract for? And then what should I, try to resell it for? Learn how to determine value quickly. That's going to save you so much time. And I know you teach this to your group, Scott, and you teach this to your, you got to be able to determine the value quickly so you don't waste your time. So you're not massaging these deals for days, weeks. I've seen these deals linger on for months, like a bad relationship. Like, get rid of this thing. Go to the next one. So anytime you have a really big rehab, unless it's in a stellar neighborhood, and I mean like it needs everything. Windows, roofing, plaster, kitchens, bathrooms, it's got an alligator in the basement. Like no, unless you're buying it for $1,000, do not touch it.
Yeah.
As close to zero as possible on anything that kind of like resembles anything like that.
Yeah.
And the conversation with the seller is really simple.
Tell us.
Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, thanks for sharing the details about this house.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't think I can get you even close to what you're looking for. We're probably not a good fit. We're going to, we might be lucky to give you, $1,000 or $2,000 for this deal. Is that something you'd entertain? And every now and then they'll say, just take it.
Well, and they know
$500,
too.
$1,000, and sure, you can make money on those.
Yeah.
But you need to be prepared to have a conversation that, just because it's a 1,500 square foot house on a piece of property doesn't mean that there's value there.
Yeah. Could agree more. I think in these smaller ARV markets, and it doesn't have to be a city, it could just be a rural area, but anything where an ARV is like 50 to 80, you're really in that thing where the repairs can be well worth more than what the value of the property is once it's repaired. And then I look at guys and gals like that, and I say, man, what's the solution for them? Unfortunately, that's why communities start to collapse, because there's really no viable reason for an investor to come in there and take over those types of properties. But for you, I think you would probably feel the same way. The reason why I think so many people get burned in that market, my opinion, is that these outsiders are calling in and doing it remotely. Like, it is so dangerous to try to virtual in to a Detroit, and being boots on the ground in Detroit has got to be such a strategic advantage over anybody who's calling in, particularly on the default rate. In other words, we locked up the deal and did we get it to the closing table? Because you're there in person. You're seeing it. You know how many dumpsters are on that road, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. It's definitely there. So you need partner. Like, if you're out of state, find somebody, build a relationship, give up a little bit of that commission. How, maybe they're going to help them, you dispo the deal. They're going to go and take pictures for you. They're going to check and see like, hey, is this actually, the address?
Is this actually the address?
Yeah. And
It's
people
so
just
true.
get it wrong. Like, hey, like you gave me an address that just doesn't exist.
Steve, this is no bullshit. Oh, real quick. One of my first deals I locked up in this space was virtual in Pennsylvania. And the guy had 7 properties. And we we worked this guy from top to bottom. And then we finally sent the photos person to go out after contract signed. Boom, we're going to take photos. Let's roll. And they get to the first property, take it. It's a real scumbag house, but okay, no problem. Go to the second property and they send us pictures of a forest. And they're like, where's this house at? And I was like, well, here's the address. Anyways, the guy hadn't been at the house so long that it had been foreclosed and demolished. And I was like, holy shit, this guy's literally selling me a house that doesn't even exist. Cancel that one. But it can happen when you're virtual.
Yeah. If that thing got on the demo list, that's gone. Man.
Gone.
A lot of these people are,
Did you ever think about going virtual? Did you ever think about taking your skills and saying, you know what, cool, man, I've done my thing here. Have you looked at ever doing virtual in other markets, Steve?
Yeah. So we started to dabble a little bit in Indiana market, which is
Which part?
Way easier than Detroit.
Really?
Kind of like Muncie, Fort Wayne,
Nice.
Just outside of Indianapolis a little bit,
Yeah.
kind of right on the outskirts. I had a partner down there that he was doing real well. So not a ton, but
Yeah.
I'd be open to it for sure.
Yeah, I was just curious. I like your market because my guys in Chicago are murdering it, doing really well. But it's the local expertise is their X factor. It really is. And they manage multiple marketing channels. And so let me focus on the marketing side. For you over the years, like what's been your go-to channel for your deals? Are you more PPC, face-to-face, referrals, cold? What are you doing?
A lot of referrals. Yeah, just getting in the community and just networking, talking to people. We got a deal closing next week. I don't know how she got my name, but she texted me and said, hey, do you want to buy my house? And we're buying her house.
You're scratching your name in the back of like every bus stop in town. Like,
yeah, it's like
crazy.
that. Somebody will see your ad somewhere and write it down. Like I've had people literally see my ad and then a year later call me. And so it's like, again, it's kind of like what we talked about at the beginning of the call, Scott. It's about continuously putting stuff out there no matter what, because you don't know when that result's going to hit. You don't know when it's going to come. But to answer your question, we are doing a lot of SEO on our website. That's
nice.
Our website's been a good staple. Cold calling for sure. That's, as far as cost per lead and, getting activity, cold calling is, it's number one, really.
Yeah.
You can, you got to be honest with your numbers. Like you're going to get the most leads from that and, bandit signs, but what's the quality on bandit signs versus cold calling? So, a lot of PPC, we're doing PPC again now. We found a good company to help us with that. We do not manage it ourselves. And PPL too. So we'll snag them from wherever we can.
Good for you. Yeah, I love SEO, man. If people really don't know the value of that, that's going to be for most channels. It's going to be one of your best converting in regards to how they found you. That's high intent. And most of the times, if they're skipping the paid, it's because they're smart enough to say, no, I want to go to that first recommendation. And they spend some time on your website, which I looked at today. It's a beautiful website. Steve Moves Detroit, right?
Yeah.
Yep. SteveMovesDetroit.com.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you. Ask you and then thank you. But
Hey,
how do you see the future of Detroit real estate? What's the kind of current condition, and then where do you honest to God, the guys live there, you've been surrounded by it, where do you really see Detroit over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, it's improving, man. Continuously improving. The values, just the attention that it's had. Everybody's been saying like, 10 more years, it's going to become, this city here, 10 more years. Like it's going, it's just not, not as fast as everybody wanted, but it's a great city. It's a hardworking city. The people are cool. It's got a lot of fun stuff to do, but the real estate specifically is definitely one of the best places in the country to buy and hold. Section 8 rentals, flips. Just partner with somebody that knows the market. Wholesaling, like There's some really big spreads. There's some really nice spreads. The barrier to entry is still relatively low, right? I
Yeah.
know that we're putting this out. We're telling the whole world on the podcast, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I see it, man. I think about those markets. I see it. I've seen a turnaround in just the past 4 years in regards to some of the markets that, when the hedge fund craze went crazy, nobody was really in these places. And now that that's died down, people are a lot more open to some of these other areas that have been underserved. And the economies need it. And it's almost this big pent up demand there in these areas for these economies where people have been stuck in this kind of laggard cycle for 10, 15 years. And they overshot their average of moving every 7 years. And it's time to go. I get texts and emails from people all the time asking me, hey, man, do you got deals in these cities? And it'll be Chicago, Detroit. And so now I'm just going to forward him your number so that way you guys can chat. Because there's a demand for it out there, man. So, dude, I appreciate it. I wanted to get to be able to connect some dots is one of the things that I love the most. I think that you are in a beautiful market, particularly the surrounding area market. And if somebody who's listening to this has deals in that area, they come across a rock star lead, they may need some help with just a conversation about this market, or they got it locked up and they're struggling to dispo it. Can they reach out to you? And then what is the best way for these guys to reach out to you so that way they can actually talk to or work with the expert from Detroit?
That's it, man. Just DM me on Instagram, steve.streit. I think that's really the easiest way. I'm on it all the time. Got to get on social media. Don't be a ghost. Create a profile if you don't have one. If you're starting out, we want to know who you are, man. Don't hide. So, yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I think you should, guys. And one of the things that I really value about Steve is I've seen him up close and personal throughout his business. I reached out to him. We first communicated about, 2-3 years ago or so. And so I was kind of newer in the space, but I've watched him and he's super authentic. And so, Steve, I kudos to you, man. And I thank you genuinely for coming on here and just chatting with us a little bit about Detroit. You got me a little bit more excited about Detroit. I loved hearing your story and kind of your perspective on this industry. And
now we got to get you up here. Well, now we got to get you up here, man. Maybe we got to go to a game. Who's your favorite NBA team? Do you have one or no?
So when I lived in Orlando, because I lived in Orlando for 14 years, I picked up the Magic and I just never let them go.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. We'll come up for a Magic game or something. We'll do it up.
Well, any of them, it doesn't matter, dude. But I'm also, and this sounds crazy, but this maybe is a reflection of my age. I'm a big history buff too. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of great entrepreneurial history in that city. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I love hearing about some of the things that inspired me as a kid that are so close to you and all the impact that, what the automobile did for the United States to push it into that next level. It's real cool stuff. And your city right there is the reason why it happened, man. So it's great, surrounded by greatness. So, dude, I appreciate you coming out again. Anything I can do for you, I got your back, buddy.
For sure. Be great. Thanks for having me on, Scott.
All right. You're very welcome, brother. Be easy.
All right.